Hello, it's Rosie here. Welcome to my office. And I just felt like sharing some thoughts that I've been having recently. It all started when I was just doing my usual thing and thinking about my life and what I'm doing. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but I developed a program called Design to Blossom where I combine some of my favorite things like the creative process, human design, which is a way of really learning how to trust ourselves in our life as unique people who make decisions in unique ways, and community. And I was thinking about this program because it's like an online program. It's a self-study course. It kind of rolls out over 3 months, and there's a teaching component, and there's an interactive component, and there's a community component, an invitation experiential component. And it's like an education that has an expressive arts flavor to it. And I worked really hard together with my husband to create this, and I've had wonderful people participating in the self-study program and in the community, and it's just been such a pleasure for me to watch them blossom. And so anyway, I say all of this because I was in my little, I don't know, my little percolation philosophical mode, and I was thinking about this program and thinking, God, you know, in some ways it looks a lot like, you know, from someone who doesn't really know what's going on the inside of it, it looks a lot like a lot of the programs that are out there trying to tell people how to develop themselves and create a wonderful, flourishing life and business and relationships and promising all of these things. And I'm like, but that doesn't feel like what I'm doing, right? I'm like, well, a lot of the programs that I've been exposed to have all been kind of about sort of building one's empire. And in a way, I kind of feel like I'm doing the opposite of that. It's not that there aren't some people who move through the program and are genuinely, authentically guided to be more expressive, and through that process they can become more successful in the outer world. But really, in a way, I'm kind of trying to support people in kind of getting off that train. Which reminds me, I brought this here into my office to show you, I was reading this book. It's called Collapsing Consciously. Written by a woman named Carolyn Baker, and it's not a very uplifting book. She has she's really trying to confront people with what's going on in the world on many different planes, and there are aspects to it I think could be a little bit more exciting or uplifting, but there are so many points in this book that I'm just really taking to heart and feel very resonant with. So, for example, one thing she talks about, I'm going to see if I can do justice to it, but that really we're getting to a place where we're kind of coming to the end of this big push phase of our species of building civilizations, building empires, something that kind of started in the Age of Enlightenment and the industrialization period, where it's all about moving up and out. It's all about progress, progress, growth, growth, with this kind of mindset that you can never grow too big. You could just always grow more. You can always have more clients. You can always make more money. You can always experience more success. And this mentality, this paradigm, which in some ways has been very reflective of a me, individualistic, not particularly interconnected way of looking at things, but also something that's not very efficient when it comes to the fact that we're living on a planet with limited resources. And so this way of thinking, this paradigm, for so many reasons, practical reasons, survival reasons, evolutionary reasons, spiritual reasons, is coming to an end. And what people are needing less than how can I move up and how can I come out with things is really like, how can we go in and how can we start dropping down? And so part of that sort of involves the downsizing movement, the little house movement, simplification movement, moving from global scale progress to local collaborations, just getting more kind of personal, moving from kind of being driven by sort of tribal, like I'm going to protect my country, my people, my nation, to more fractal kinds of relationships that are based on people who are of the same frequency, people who are relating on a soul level. It doesn't matter what their cultural background is or their religion or their ethnicity. It's really like, where are they oriented in terms of their worldview? That these are the things that are going to start to bring people together more than these kind of conditioned and passed down through the generation cultural tribal connections. But anyway, it just made me think that, oh yeah, so what else was I going to say about that? So anyway, so that's one thing she's saying, is that we're sort of moving away from this up and out forever growth model to, okay, I think we're using up all the planet's resources now. Now we have to get smart. And now we have to start not just thinking with our minds, which can continually come up with new things to create, but start thinking more with our hearts. And I remember Richard Rudd from the Gene Keys, the developer of the Gene Keys, used to talk about something called YQ, right? So IQ is like, oh my God, what can we make and how can we make it, and how awesome is it that our minds are so brilliant that we can create an atom bomb, right? And then we've got emotional intelligence, right, which has to do with empathy and compassion. And then there's YQ, which is, why do we create what we create? And in order to really develop that YQ, we need to be using the EQ. You know, how is this going to be like the Native American people have been saying, or the indigenous cultures have been saying for many years, how can this thing that I'm creating benefit the next 7 generations, right? We need to be moving into that heart-based YQ territory. Okay, so there was that piece, and then this woman, Carolyn Baker, also talks about, I know I'm a little scattered, but that's all right. She talks about how, in a way, you could look at what's happening in on our planet right now as a collapsing of all of the different structures that served us well during this period of progress and building and industrialization, but are no longer serving us well, that are actually creating a great deal of suffering and chaos, that how all of these structures are starting to collapse. So part of the reasons why these old structures aren't working so well is beyond the practical. It's because they're representing a worldview that is no longer serving humanity. So we're sort of like, our species is growing up. And as people grow up, they move out of that sort of adolescent me way of thinking, and they start moving into more collaborative worldviews, where we start to understand that if someone's suffering over there, then I'm going to be suffering over here. And that in the end, you know, we may have these things that look like they separate us in terms of our ideology or our culture or ethnicity, whatever, but really deep down we're all human. We all have beating hearts. We all have the same basic needs, to be loved, to be safe, to be healthy, to be relatively happy, right? And so as we mature, other values start to just naturally become more important than just making sure that we have all the money that we need so that we can shop for whatever we want, so that we can promote our businesses, so that our businesses can get as big as they can possibly be, so we can have as big of an impact and have as big of a public persona. You know, like that whole like, it can never get big enough, we can never get successful enough. A lot of that is really coming from this old paradigm, which is connected to fear and survival, but also the ego, right? So she's saying that as a species, we're in the process of evolving, we're in the process of maturing, and so our values are beginning to change. And the structures that are holding our societies together need to change in order to reflect that evolutionary impulse that's taking place. And on a spiritual level, you could say we're moving from a strategic mind place, which is all about, I have this idea and I'm going to go and I'm going to create it and manifest it, and I'm going to control people so that they can work for me, so that we can build these big skyscrapers together, for example, to something completely different, which is we are all connected, and each of us brings a gift with us, and each of us carries our own wounds. And when each of us kind of takes ownership of our wounds, then we don't judge, we don't project as much, and we can much better collaborate and join together, where each of us is bringing our unique gift to the table. So as we're kind of maturing as a species and facing some of the consequences that our drive for never-ending growth has had on our planet and on our fellow human beings and our fellow inhabitants of the planet, who aren't human but definitely have feelings and sovereignty and beauty and intelligence. You know, as we kind of take stock of where we are and we start moving towards more collaborative, more uniquely empowering, more authentic roles in smaller communities, then it becomes really important that one, we look at our conditioning, that we look at all of the inherited thoughts and values and shoulds and ideals that we've inherited through these generations, through our parents, through our educational system, about what it means to be a success, what it means to be a good citizen, what it means to be a good person, and look at all the ways in which these conditioning messages have kind of gotten us to be working really, really hard to be who we're not, you know? Like, for example, if someone is an artist in their heart, you know, and they're taught that the only way to be successful is to be very good in academics and get a Ph.D. and then get a job as a doctor and then provide for your family and do the responsible thing, then over time, that artist inside of them can get more and more stifled and eventually create, you know, express itself in creative, shadowy ways, right? So that's a very simple example, but what I'm talking about, all the different ways that we learned that it wasn't safe just to be ourselves, that it wasn't safe to take our time if we're not someone who likes to be in a hurry all the time, to trust our pacing, to trust our right relationships. So when I think about the program that I created, I'm realizing it's really not about helping people build empires. You know, not many people are actually built to build empires. And that's really not what's being called for or called forth from us these days. What I'm really here to support people in is trusting themselves and knowing themselves. Like, who are you when you when you let go of all those thoughts about who you should be and what you should be doing and how much you should be doing it and for whom you should be doing it and how much money you should be making doing it and how many people you should be providing for or impressing while you're doing it or how big you should get while you're doing it, right? All these things are distractions from what it is that is our natural organic desire to just contribute our essence to this world. And one of the things that Carolyn Baker talks about, she kind of says, like, if you kind of look at the world right now as being in a state of collapse, where all of these structures that have actually been helping the world run, the economic structures, the banking system, the educational system, the healthcare systems, all these systems, they're kind of breaking down. They're not, I don't know how much longevity they have left, right? And if you think about it, we're kind of collectively moving through a process that could be very likened to death, right? There are a lot of things that we need to let go of that aren't working anymore. And of course, every death involves a birth as well. There's always a rebirth that happens after a death. But for that to happen, for the new to be born in our collective and in us as individuals, we need to be able to tend to the death process. And so one thing she talks about is, like, what would it be like if we looked at the world as a giant hospice? And that, you know, if you really think about it, hospice, you know, a lot of people think of that and they think, oh my God, I can't imagine a worse place to be. But if you actually talk to people who work in hospice settings, you're going to find that a lot of them experience a great deal of life. You know, they really have to be there in those moments of life that really matter. So much forgiveness can happen, so much closure can happen, so much love can be expressed, so many opportunities to really sink into what matters, to what really matters. None of the superfluous stuff, right? It's really about, hey, do we get to say what we need to say? You know, in our deathbeds, are we happy with the way that we lived? It's so not about, did we build that empire? It's about, did I tell that person that I loved them? Did I clean up that mistake? Did I repair that wound? Right? And in a way, that's kind of what we're all being asked to do as many of these larger systems are starting to fall apart. We're being asked to really drop in and ask ourselves what really matters, right? And so what really matters, that whole question starts to tap into this EQ, YQ thing. Right? And so that can be experienced on many different levels in terms of, you know, does my business have to be that big? You know, do I need to be that big? No, I mean, what really matters is that I can sustain myself through this business enough so that I can enjoy my relationships, or I can enjoy my body, or I can be present with the tree in my backyard, right? Does it matter so much what everybody thinks of me? No. It really matters that I feel like I'm actually being myself, that I'm offering the gifts that I actually feel passionate about, that I'm not just constantly trying to please or trying to prove something to somebody or finally trying to win my parents' approval or whatever. No, that's not what matters at my deathbed, right? I'm going to look back and I'm going to be like, hey, did I live my life? Or did I live some life that somebody else wanted me to? So I guess that's kind of the invitation here that I'm extending in this video, but I'm also extending through my program, is to give people opportunities to really drop in and ask these really important questions. Like, what really matters? And how many of the things that we've been taught matters are reflecting a very old and increasingly outdated paradigm that's got us running like rats on wheels. You know, working so hard, keeping up with emails and Twitter and LinkedIn and networking and God knows what else we're doing, right? I mean, everybody I know, we're so overwhelmed. We can't keep up. There's something unsustainable happening. And what might happen if we let some of that collapse? If we experience an internal collapse along with this societal or this collective collapse, and we approach it as we would a hospice worker, with love, with an open heart, with a gentleness, and a very keen eye on what matters. When everything falls away, you know, when all of the stupid things that we do to please other people or win other people's approval, when all that stuff falls away and we start actually living our own lives, what's left? Right? What's left? What do we want at the end of our lives to look back on and know that we did, or we felt, or we experienced, or we simply were with? Right? At the end of someone's life, when you're with them, it's really just about presence. It's just about presence. And my sister has a wonderful teacher named Anand, a yoga teacher. I think it's called Sattva Yoga. And he talks a lot about life purpose and how it's so not about what we do. It's not about what we do. It's about the quality of awareness, consciousness, the openness of our heart that we bring into every situation, into every interaction. That's our life purpose, right? And for me, that's very connected to this whole sort of hospice metaphor. You know, there are things that are falling apart. There may be things in your life as you come to know yourself better, as you come to listen in to your own authority, your own truth compass better. There may be things that need to fall apart. There may be people who get disappointed. There may be people who feel shocked or surprised by some of the changes that you start to make in your life to make your life feel more sustainable, more streamlined, more connected, more mature, less about growth, big, but more about going in and down, going deep. It might be more quiet. So anyway, when I think back to this program, it made me feel a little bit better, because I had been kind of judging it a little bit when I looked at it from the outside and like, what am I doing, what everybody else is doing? But actually, I don't feel like I am. I feel like I'm trying to be just one of the many voices that are emerging now that are inviting people to slow down and to get off the train and to question those impulses that are arising out of lifetimes of conditioning. And I'm trying to give people permission to be who they are and to take their time and to enjoy their life, even if this means letting go, letting certain things die, letting certain relationships fade out, letting certain ways of kind of like chugging along, letting that fall away. And it's not an easy process by all means, and especially if you're an entrepreneur and you're getting a ton of, pressure saying you're not doing enough, you got to do more, you got to be bigger, blah. I really want to be another voice out there saying there's a way for you to flourish and to offer your gifts without sacrificing who you are and without living a life that feels completely unsustainable. You know, we want to make sure that everybody is both breathing in and breathing out, right? So there's got to be a time for self-care, for nourishment, as well as a time to express and to share one's gifts and one's talents. And this is my invitation to you to really start looking at the balance of your life and allowing yourself to see, whether you like it or not, whether your mind likes it or not, what's on the way out, what's collapsing. And see if you can just breathe into that. There are some things that may need to be let go of. There are aspects of your life you may need to shed in order for something new and more mature and more solid and more grounded and more connected to grow. So, yeah, I guess that's all I have to say for now. And I hope you have a lovely day.